Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a great new episode for you from the brand Certina. It's been a while since we featured this brand on the channel, but honestly, the first DS action diver that I featured on this channel is actually one of its most popular videos. If you take a look at my channel history, a little bit about the brand. Certina was founded back in 1888. They're Swiss made. They're part of the Swatch group within the middle range, very similar to Mito. They're kind of like lesser known cousins to Hamilton or Tissot in terms of what you would expect from their kind of build quality and what they offer kind of within that value proposition. Now, the type of watch this is of course a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language: you're looking for a diver, you're going to want water resistance, typically through some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is the DS Action Diver. This is a new update for 2022, and it's basically, Certina's take on the Swiss-made ISO certified diver's watch. DS standing for double security. It goes for about 880 Swiss francs, or you can get it for around $800 to $900 USD, depending on where you get these from a dealer. This is the full size model, which is 43 millimeters. They do have smaller variations that have been getting a lot of love, but honestly, I feel like the classic 43 millimeter size really suits this design language and the case style, and also my old ETA powered Certina here that you see on the left has been a real classic, and it wore really well even at that larger size. So I did want to get something that was quite comparable from that perspective to kind of share with you guys. So with that, I've been really looking forward to doing an update on the DS Action Diver, but the first couple of reiterations that came out, honestly, I didn't feel were up to par, living up to kind of the legacy of the model here on the left. So really happy to report to you guys this model, newer one on the right, actually stands up really, really well. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. All right, so first let's pick up the classic, guys. Some things that people really enjoyed about this model is that it looked quite different, but at the same time, I think it carried over a lot of what you would expect from a modern dive watch. It had a very kind of IWC-like bezel, nice angular broad shoulders here from the case, simple 3-link design, maybe overly simple clasp compared to modern standards, but did have a milled folding section and a little stamped diver's extension there as well. What I really enjoyed was the dial and bezel combination, where you can actually see how the way that the light plays with the dial. It does the same thing with this bezel. There's a certain continuation within that pattern that you just don't see anywhere else, and it was achieved by having this kind of acrylic nature insert there, which unfortunately with time has picked up a little bit of patina, has begun to yellow just a touch there compared to the rest of the loom, but it's really quite charming. The really toothy gear here, and it's only a 60 click, but still feeling good for a 60 click. Very professional feeling, and yeah, also an ISO certified diver. So this one meant the business, and it has quite a cult following. So with that, definitely very large shoes to fill. And that brings us to the newer model for 2022, now with ceramic insert. And you can see in terms of the dial and the bezel really matching, they've done it again, except here it's more of that glossy finish versus the sunray finish. Also, you're going to see now that the loom here at the 12 o'clock pip is now shielded and protected, which is something that I think they might have learned from this particular previous iteration. It's important to protect that loom so it doesn't discolor. So the nice thing is also that whatever paint or anything that they used for the indexes here. They're going to remain white because they're painted and they're not loom. And then the only loom that is there at the 12 o'clock pip is protected, so it's going to look really fantastic. Also, you can see the moving of the date window to the more traditional 3 o'clock position versus here being tucked in kind of at the 4.5. But you can also notice that the general silhouette is quite similar. I don't think they're the same case because I think there's enough differences, but the similarities are certainly striking. That similar kind of machined edge on the side there, the wide angular shoulders, the male end link protruding to the 3 links. Although I'll say now the 3 links are shorter, which is great, and also you're getting a lot more adjustability because of the extra half links, as well as having a more modern ratcheting system there in terms of the diver's extension versus the classic here with just the stamped. So with that said, I think we've kind of drawn the comparisons we need to. So we'll go ahead and take this nice classic off frame so we can focus on this new beauty of a model. Now, a little bit about the diameter, just really the specs here. 43 millimeters wide, but I will say that it wears well. It doesn't really wear oversized, it wears full sized. So 43 millimeter diameter, 12.9 millimeters thick, which considering isn't too bad. 51 millimeters lug to lug, and of course, probably closer to 55 if you count the male end link protrusion there, but I'm not really one to count that. Sorry, just giving it a quick wipe off camera here. Just because, depending on the architecture of the bracelet, that male end link sticking out isn't really going to make that much of a difference, especially when you see how much it slopes down. So, very angular signature look here from the side as well, with those nice blocky crown guards and that nicely done crown there signed with DS for double security. And then now you do get this great modern dive extension. And one thing I will say is it would have been nice to see some manual micro adjust holes somewhere within this, just to help with dialing things in, but the half links do help a lot. You also do get some nice chamfering on the fully milled clasp. Very handsome. You see the case back still carrying on, but just a little bit higher execution in terms of how deep the stamping goes. When you compare it to the older model there, which it was more of an etch. Here, it's more of kind of a 3D affair. So the movement inside, although you can't see it, is the Swiss Automatic Powermatic 80.611, which beats away at 3 hertz. It has an 80-hour power reserve and uses a Nivacron balance spring. So you do get some nice anti-magnetic properties from that point as well. The case back is solid, which again, in terms of that magnetic protection, adds to that. And just overall, it just feels really nice and sturdy. You're getting applied indices, you're getting this great glossy dial, date at 3 o'clock, really nicely executed. You're getting polished hands, as you can see. And yeah, they're an original set that are very iconic to the brand, to the model, which I think is really nice. The loom on here is BGW9 Swiss Superluminova. It's water resistant to an extra 100 meters, so now it's 300 meters or 30 bar of water resistance within that ISO 6425 certification. It has 21 millimeter lugs, so that stays the same in terms of the sizing. I know some people were probably hoping it'd be 20, but at least in this modern age, it's not that hard to find 19 and 20 millimeter aftermarket strap options. So you should still be good to go. In terms of the construction here, solid links, solid end links, friction pin connectors, and then of course the milled push button clasp does come in handy. And then you do have the nice ratcheting section, or let's say it's just a little bit hot, you want to let a little click out. If your wrist is swollen for whatever reason, you can always do that as well. Now, in terms of how this wears on the wrist, I know you've been trying to take my word for it, but I'll go ahead and show you how it wears. So let's go ahead and change that up. All right, now as you can see on my 7 1/4 to about 7.5 inch wrist, this thing wears really beautifully. Of course, if you get up close, it may appear a little oversized, but that's mostly lens distortion. When you get more arm here and hand within frame, you can see it wears quite nice. Full sized again. It doesn't. It's not really reaching to pull at any vintage heartstrings by any means. This is meant to be a modern, more contemporary take on a diver, and it feels quite capable, quite modern, and I gotta say, quite wearable. I think they did a really good job without making the watch dull or overly plain. They did incorporate some things that were just a little bit more crowd pleasing in terms of that bezel tooth design there. Very nice, a little bit more refined, flows really, really well, and I do enjoy the symmetry of the kind of the whole overall aesthetic treatment here. I think looks really great. And you can see that with that mass there on the wrist, it doesn't overpower it. It still lays relatively flat, and I think has quite nice ergonomics for something that's really meant to be, bulky and chunky and really stand out as kind of an overbuilt dive watch. But in terms of divers, of course, we do have to check out the loom. We'll see how that goes, get some low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, we'll go ahead and hit the lights here. As you can see, BGW9 glowing quite nicely, just like you'd expect from a diver. You don't get any partially loomed sections on the bezel insert, which is a bit of a letdown, but because I think it did add a lot to the character of the previous model. But the nice thing is you can still get really great orientation. You can tell where 12 o'clock is, even in the darkness. But you know what? You're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself in less than optimal lighting conditions and mixed lighting conditions, maybe spending some time indoors, or maybe even when you're walking underneath an overhang, underneath the shade of a tree, or just spending time in your favorite automobile. So it is nice to see how not only the finishes and textures kind of render in less than optimal lighting, to include maybe some harsh lighting here, as you can see, which typically would expose any type of factory defects within that finish. But wow, all it really shows you is how versatile that blue is, and the way that glossiness picks up in a very uniform way, in a similar way that it's very uniform as the light glides over that really nice professionally done brushing. But you can also notice that in the kind of mixed lighting there, that it still remains quite legible, even without having any loomed portioning apart from the loom pip on that bezel insert. So nice high contrast, even in kind of dusky, less than optimal lighting situations, which I think will come in handy whether you're in the depths of the water or just in not the perfect lighting and you're just out and about doing your thing. And then you can see that blue on there is fantastic, not overly bright, not overly retro or polarizing. It's a very nice shade of a dark blue that looks and matches really, really well compared to that bezel insert. All right. Now, closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, very sporty and toolish kind of personality with a splash of refinement. I'd say an even bigger splash of refinement over the previous model. I shouldn't say previous model, but over the classic, because it's slowly been refined over time. I'm just glad that they finally got some ceramic involved in terms of the insert. Also providing that shielded loom pip, I think, was also a great choice. Now, in terms of model variants, There's also various color options, blacks, greens, two tones, and whether it be blue gold or black and gold. And then there's even titanium variations as well as smaller 38 millimeter size ranges. So there's a lot of different options. Again, for me with a larger wrist, I feel like this particular layout, this aesthetic, this kind of chunky squared off thing, it really doesn't belong on a smaller watch. It belongs on a watch of this scale, and I think it hits it, really nicely. So I wouldn't even wish for this to be any smaller because I think it wears quite well, and it exceeds at what it's trying to do. It's really well executed in terms of the theme of that kind of chunky overbuilt style. In terms of comparable models, this is and has been quite comparable over the years to something like the Oris Aquis, where you get kind of a similar theme, just more original kind of stylized approach with the Aquis. And then on, even from within the Swatch Group's stable, you get the Longines Hydro Conquest, very similar, kind of in terms of the classic aesthetics, but more refined in their approach. This one is a little bit rougher around the edges, a little bit more modern, not quite as timeless as the Longines. And then I'd say right now it's most clearly targeting the Tag Heuer Aquaracer Professional 300, which is also 43 millimeters, also quite angular and hits a lot of the same notes. But this costs less than a third of that. So, over $3,000 for the Tag. Here you can get it for under $1,000, so I think that's great. In terms of the bottom line, guys, finally a worthy successor to that cult classic DS action of the past. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.